to the class. Okay, you all should have gotten something that says we're now recording. All right, so hey, it's nice to be back on Thursday evenings together. We're going to do 2 sessions this week and next week, and then we're going to take a break again for the holidays, and we'll pick up probably the first week in October, maybe last week in September. We'll see how I'm feeling at the end of the gauntlet, but definitely the first week in October. So these 2 sessions are on the high holidays. This one's going to be a little mushier. We're going to use a lot of Hasidic stories, which are my favorite, really. And then next week, we're going to take a little more technical look at a lot of the liturgy and whatnot. But the idea of this is really, we are coming up on about halfway through Elul. The high holidays are about 3 weeks away. And we're supposed to have a feeling growing in us through Elul. And we are supposed to be going, like, sort of beginning this turn towards the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of repentance. And the question that I want to look at today, which sounds like a soft question, but I think will actually be very interesting when we see it explored in the texts, is, what is the proper attitude? What is the emotion we're supposed to be cultivating through Elul, through the high holidays? What's the emotion that we're supposed to be sort of adopting this time of year? So before we go to the text and we take a look, there's not a single answer to this, by the way. But when we talk about, like, how do the high holidays feel emotionally? How are we supposed to feel emotionally? What are the things that pop into your head? Nothing. Fern, you are muted, I think, but you're trying to speak.
Introspective.
Okay, reflective, introspective. I like that. What else? Come on, you've all been through a lot of high holidays. They are an emotionally charged time in many ways. What are some of the emotions that come along, or that you think we're trying to make you feel on the high holidays?
I feel like the time before the high holidays, I
Mhm.
like to try to start feeling excited and looking forward to the newness and refreshing. I think it's harder this year.
Mhm.
It's a different feeling. It's some uncertainty. That's why I took this class. I thought that's part of helping to get there.
Yes,
Yeah.
I hope so.
And then there's also just the mundane of what am I going to cook and who's eating, but now the added pieces, will it be
Where?
outdoors? Will it be indoors? Can we invite extended families? So it adds just another layer.
Yeah, great stuff. I think both. I love that you brought both, like, sort of the higher level thing where you're trying to sort of look to the new year and get excited, and then the mundane.
Trying to get to the higher level, but not there yet.
Yeah, but also, like, there is like the cooking and who are we inviting, and there's are we sending cards this year? Are we going to do an email instead? And like, there's a lot of, like, mundane details. I love that you kind of brought both sides of it, and both have their own challenges this year, for sure.
There's also a community aspect to it. We look forward to gathering together with people that we see all the time, and people that we never see.
Right. Yeah, the cantor says, I always like, he says, more than a service, the high holidays are like a family reunion. It's like a life cycle event, like more than a tefillah event. It's a life cycle event, and like the life cycle of the shul. Everyone shows up, they see people they don't see, and it's how the kids, you sit with the people that you sat with every year. I don't know if that has so much of a thing, but so like, and I think that's a really beautiful way to describe it and think about it.
I get a feeling along those lines, like I'm at a convention. There are a bunch of people who I don't see all the time, but whatever organization, I don't go to APAC. I wish I could, but it's like where you see certain people once a year at a big event, and it's a big spectacular thing because you see so many people moving around at the same time, and everybody's all nicely dressed up, and all that. There's a sense of a feeling like I'm at an annual convention of something. Yeah.
I love that. The annual convention of the Jews.
Yeah.
That's true.
Very good. Any other emotional they serious? Are they fun? Are they,
I dislike them intensely.
dislike the high holidays? Why? In a nutshell. In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Though it's interesting because it's been the last couple of weeks post Kiddush conversation. First off, I am very visceral about my space. And so when everybody's there, they're in my space and it's uncomfortable. So there's that. I've never really been attached to the liturgy. I find it hard to connect with. It's not my vision of God. And also it's just, for a teacher, it's already an incredibly stressful time of year, and to add holidays in is just like, forget it. So, but this year, on Rosh Hashanah, I'm just Safta. That's it. I'm going to shul, hanging out with Jonah.
I bet you'll like that. That'll be your favorite, your favorite holidays yet. And Leslie, were you gonna add something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, along Julie's line of thought, I prefer Shabbat. It's more doable. It's an easier size to handle rather than the Hagim, which I look at as 30 days long. I haven't learned to individualize them. It's like a marathon. But
Yeah.
having said that, there is a piece every year as it comes closer of making changes, starting over, something new, something refreshed, something better, which gives me the chance to think about, what can I do, or what can we do, or what can we do as a family or as a Jewish family to do something a little bit better this year.
Nice. All right, very good. Let's those are all great answers. There's no right or wrong answer, of course.
Richie had his finger
Yes.
raised instead of just jumping in.
Oh, Richie, yes.
I'm trying to be polite
So
because we're being
polite, wow.
recorded. I think of it as it reminds me. Well, in my last few years before I retired, I was one of the only Jewish people in the department at the hospital, Strange from Montefiore Hospital, other than my boss, who was modern Orthodox, and so he was never around. Nor did he ever discuss with any of the staff who were non-Jewish about why he was off that day or why he was fasting that day or whatever else. So it was up to me to kind of explain to the staff what was going on with the boss that day. But when they asked me about Judaism, I always explained that it takes a lot of work to be Jewish. And this reminds me, when it comes to this month and then the high holidays, that it's the start of this process, that it's a lot of work to be Jewish. You have lots of things that you have an obligation, or you feel you have an obligation to do. And so this kind of reawakens that process, kind of like along the line what Leslie was talking about. There's things you got to do. It reminds you, it's nice. It's a change of season. You look forward to changes of seasons, but it also means getting ready, getting out, getting in, getting people over, going to people's places, doing stuff. So that's my thought on the subject.
Fair. I think that's a profound thought. Okay, Tam, you get the last word on this before we go to the videotape, as they say.
Okay, I love the high holidays. I do. And they're a lot of work, like logistically a lot of work. I'm the person who's asking, should we be doing an e-card or sending out things and stamping them? But the first time I hear whatever chazan I'm with doing that, like da, 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 I am transported to like a nostalgia of every Rosh Hashanah I've ever been at. And I love it. I love hearing the shofar blown and how it just like seeps inside of me. And not that every year on Rosh Hashanah, like, is it a truly transformative spiritual experience? But if nothing else, it is a memory and a connection to years and years of doing it with my parents, and then, you know, once in Israel, twice in Israel, whatever. Like I can connect to different moments. And I love Rosh Hashanah. I love the fall coming and the feeling of the start of a new year that usually coincides with the new school year and the new clothes we used to always get. I love it.
Nice. Nice. So you are all correct. And you all have lots of good company, because you're going to see in the text that I'm going to share, I think just about all of these emotions represented, and maybe some other surprising ones. I might have to bend a little to get to some of them, but I think they're all in here. So I put in the chat, if you want it, the link to the source sheet, although I'm going to share the source sheet, so you don't have to go to it. Some people like to be able to scroll it and follow it themselves. But why does that not look like it's the right page? Sorry. Oh, that's weird. Hold on one second.
The link wasn't live, but if you copy and paste it, it worked just fine.
Yes, that makes sense to me. Okay, here we go. Sorry, it like logged me out of Safari. Very strange. Now it is back. Okay. Okay, everybody can see the text sheet there. Okay, so I call this Elul Awakenings. We're going to talk today about the shofar and about slichot and about the month of Elul in general as a lead-in to the high holidays. We're going to, most of the exploration is going to be through Hasidic stories and texts. And I just think they're great. And I think the you know, for whatever reason, the Hasidim, so these are the mystics in Eastern Europe, starting in like the mid 1700s and going even till today, but these stories are like mid 1700s to mid 1800s, really key into a lot of these very honest takes on the high holidays as we find them. So the first one of these is not, in fact, a Hasidic tale, but just the idea of, so not this Saturday night, but starting a week from Saturday night, we're going to say Slichot. And that is a long set of services customarily said at midnight on the Shabbat, immediately preceding Rosh Hashanah, when Rosh Hashanah is in the latter half of the week, the 2 Shabbatot before Rosh Hashanah, when Shabbat is towards the beginning of the week, as it is this year. So, and the Slichot prayers are these sort of like prayers asking for forgiveness. The question was asked, where did it come from? So there's a midrash. It's a really good question. This custom of doing Slichot. By the way, Sfaradim, by the way, do Slichot every night. Starting now, and we just do it the once as Ashkenazim. Different.
That's because they eat rice on Pesach.
So they have a lot more to atone for.
That's the joke.
I've never heard that one. I like it.
Lots of little grains of rice. They've got
one for every grain. Okay, so this is from a somewhat obscure midrashic collection called the Tana Debei Eliyahu Zuta. And this is the source for Slichot. So someone to read for us, starting with David New.
Okay. David knew that the temple would be destroyed in the future and the sacrificial cult would be nullified. And David was troubled, thinking, how will Israel make atonement then? So God said to David, when troubles come upon Israel, let them, 1, stand before me as a unit, 2, and make confession before me, 3, and say the Slichot service before me, and I will answer them. But how did God reveal the services to Israel? God came down from the heavenly mist like a Sheliach Zibor, a cantor, wrapped in a tallit and revealed to Moses the order of the service of forgiveness.
Okay, so this is a midrash, of course, so take it for what it's worth. We're not looking for the truth of the origin of these prayers, but we are looking for the idea of these prayers. So what do we get out of the midrash? What is this slichot period all about? Why does it exist? Is it important? Is it not important? What's going on here? So first of all, go ahead, Lee. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, they're including it within the transition from sacrificial to rabbinic Judaism. That the old way was we do sacrifices for Yom Kippur. The new way is we pray or say certain liturgy. That's the general change from two forms of worship, the temple and after the temple. So this is saying that includes this.
Yes, but yes, but
it legitimizes prayer because he was worried. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It's like, no, God knew this was going to happen. God wanted this transition, so God already put in place with Moshe the fix.
Right, absolutely right. So it is not an accident. So Moshe is a character in this midrash, and who's the other one?
David.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about David worrying what we're going to do when we don't have a sacrificial cult anymore?
The temple wasn't
Because
even
the
built
temple-
during
yeah.
his life.
Yeah, right. So we have this predating the actual temple. So he has a premonition. He's a Navi, right? David is a prophet as well as a king, at least according to this midrash, and he has a premonition that the temple is going to be destroyed, and he is worried. Well, how are my people going to gain redemption when they sin if they can't have a Yom Kippur service? So I think putting it in David, of course, is the king who's going from whose line the Messiah is going to come and all this kind of thing. I think it puts it in a very legitimizing kind of place. And then to make it even more legitimate, where does David get it? David gets it from Moses. Oh, Lee, you might say, oh, when the temple's destroyed, the rabbis make up these prayers in place of no. The prayers, the idea for the prayers comes before the temple even existed, and the prayers themselves were revealed to Moses at Sinai. So I think for sure this is a legitimizing kind of a thing, saying, in fact, maybe the opposite to what you said, Lee, which is these are not sort of a makeup for the fact that we can't do sacrifices, but they came at the same time as sacrifices. They're like equally important according to this. But okay, so that's one really fascinating thing about the midrash. What's the other really fascinating thing about this midrash that should jump out at you and be like, what?
Together as a unit, not singly.
Okay,
perhaps as a community.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is where we get this idea of this giant communal nature, all these people coming and invading Julie's sanctuary, right? Why do they come? They come because, God told David, when we do these prayers, when we make this expiation, we need to do it all together. It is a communal thing, which is really upside down, right? Most other cultures, confession happens in private because who wants to shout out all their shameful things? Very famously, there's two ways to make it okay to shout out your shameful things. One is to do it all by yourself alone, although that's a lot of pressure and very difficult. The other is to have everybody shout out the shameful things all together, and then you're kind of covered up by each other, and you don't know who might have actually done it and who didn't and whatnot. So there's this strength in the unity, this truth that comes in the unity. Before they make confession, and then there's the slichot prayers. But it's something else that I think is even wilder. That's a very important point. But something like what a shocking claim made by the midrash.
God in the talus.
Yeah. Who said that? God in the talus.
Tammy.
Yeah. So where the prayers come from, God gives them to Moses. Now God comes down on Sinai, reveals himself to the whole people, what, fiery cloud, earthquake, volcano, whatever, right? God's revealing these prayers to Moses. How does God do it? God dresses up as a cantor and davens them for Moses.
Well, Rabbi, if the translation is right that it's saying like a cantor, that's just a simile. I mean, it's poetic. It means that it's not making a claim that God is, we're not going back to God being physically anthropomorphic, like in, some hints in Genesis, that he's got a body and can walk around with us sometimes. It's saying like, it's a simile. He's acting like a cantor.
Well, I mean, you could, Kishaliach Tzibor is what it says. So it could be like, it could also be like as a cantor.
Mm.
Right. So maybe it's just, but even if it's just metaphorical, why does the Midrash want to either poetically make God into a cantor here, or maybe literally say that he came down as the cantor and revealed these prayers to Moses, wrapped in a talus like a cantor? What is that about? Why does the Midrash go there?
Personally, I think it's because that's what is done at the synagogue. The cantor is saying all these things for us, and he's making sort of a connection why we don't have the temple. We weren't at we're not actually standing at Sinai, but it's just like it.
Telling us what about our current?
Well, the cantor comes and he says the prayers for us, and we're all, together, and he's all dressed up in purity, just the way God came down from the heaven with a pure mist around him and around God, I should say, and then the same thing, the order of service of forgiveness. That's what we do.
Yeah, I think so. So what's the emotional message of this about slichot and about the prayers around the high holidays? Like, if you just read this, what would you think is supposed to be the emotional setting of these prayers?
That they're as holy as if God came down to us.
Yeah, super holy, majestic, right? Beautiful. By the way, it's not saying that the cantor is God, right? It's just saying that the cantor is also not the cantor, which I think is a very important point. It doesn't matter who the cantor is, right? We get confused, like, that these prayers are being delivered by a prayer leader, a shaliach tzibor, and that role is a very important role, right? And that role is as if like leading the people to redemption the way God leads the people to redemption. And it's solemn, and it's important, and it's majestic, and it's serious, and it's like Sinai, right? Like God's coming down and doing this. I think that imagery is like, I don't know, I find my mind just boggled by it.
The other thing that kind of blows me away is it's not that the Shaliach Tzibor is like God, but it's God's like a Shaliach Tzibor.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not, and that this is at a time before the temple, so it's not like well before there was even tefillot and shalichim tzibor, and so that kind of crazy.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point. So I think the message of this midrash, when we come back to the question of the emotional valence of the time, right, is that, it's supposed to be making us think of Sinai. It's supposed to be making us think of being close to God, not just in a spiritual sense, but in like a literal sense, where you're supposed to look up at the Shliach Tzibor and hear these prayers and be sort of transmuted to time and place where, God is showing us the way to get back close to God. And very powerful, I think, very majestic imagery, a little frightening imagery. I think Sinai comes with it, some frightening imagery. So, and I think this is, by the way, sort of the classical approach when when we read about the high holidays, when we see images of the holiday, we think about the holiday, this like solemn occasion, here in solemn gathering, we come before God to seek forgiveness. And so I think some of that imagery kind of comes from here. It's sort of like a big, powerful, majestic, and we stand together before God as a unit. By the way, that's also comes like Sinai, right? All the Jews were at Sinai together. A lot of Sinai imagery, right? A lot of revelatory imagery, and God ultimately leading the way personally to our redemption. Very, very powerful ideas. Okay, other thoughts on this before we move on? Okay, very good. So that's sort of the classic. This is where Elul and Seichot kind of become important. Take that for what it's worth. All right. The next story now is from Levi Yitzchak Miberdichev, one of the great eight, one of the sort of the great early Hasidic masters. And now I found a couple of midrashim about these great Hasidic sages looking for a shofar blower for their synagogue. And they have tests, who should be the one to be able to be the shofar blower. It's a very coveted place, right? So this is the first one of those midrashim. And of course, whatever the Rav is looking for in a shofar blower is maybe a reflection on what we should be feeling at this time or striving for emotionally at this time. So Levi Yitzchak, someone to read for us this text?
I'll read. Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, portrait of a Hasidic master. Several weeks before Rosh Hashanah, when he was rabbi in Berdichev, Levi Yitzchak let it be known that he needed someone to blow the shofar in his Beit HaMidrash. At once there descended upon him all manner of shofar blowers from the city and even beyond, each anxious to sound the shofar in the Beit HaMidrash of the Rav. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak tested each applicant with this question: what goes on in your mind at the very moment of the blast? Each one attempted to prove his mastery of the mythical thoughts relating to the sounding of the shofar, according to the Ari and the other great Kabbalists. But not one of them pleased Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. One day, a shofar blower he did not know approached him and said, "My lord, I am one of the common people. I have 4 daughters, all of whom have reached the age of marriage. At the moment when I sound the shofar, there's only one thought in my mind. Master of the world, I've bent my will to yours and fulfilled all of your mitzvot. You too then bend your will to mine and help me to find husbands for my daughters." Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's heart filled with great joy, and he said, "Your kavana was a true kavana. You will blow shofar in my Beit HaMidrash."
All right. So reactions to this Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's test and the common man who passes it.
Well, the common man says, I need something. And that's the true kavana, according to Rabbi Yitzchak. This common man's sense that, not that he's being greedy, selfish, I want something for myself, but God is a source of something, of blessings.
I think the first auditioners, if you want to call them, said what they thought Rabbi Levi Yitzchak wanted to hear, but the common man said what was really in his heart.
All right, so there's so both great answers. So there's an honesty to the answer. There's an honesty when we approach God that we have our needs. From what Lee said, that the genuine prayer is that we have needs and we want them to be met. So there's that. What else? If we take this as a message about the high holidays in a greater thing, if we're all supposed to sort of be this, what's it trying to tell us about how we should approach the high holidays?
Well, I mean, I have an eye for always like seeking community. I do that in my classes. And so I see that in this, it's not that what God can do for me or what I can do for God, but it's what God partner with me and help me, bend your will to mine and help me find husbands for my daughters. Not do it, but partner with me. And so I think that's just jumped out at me.
So the sense that there's like a partnership or like a tit for tat, like, look, I'm doing what you want me to do. I'm doing your mitzvahs. How about
Not
you?
no tit for tat, like literally working together, being in communion with each other.
I like that. It's a very beautiful idea. I think it's a generous reading. I mean, he says, I bent my will to yours and did the mitzvot. Now you bend your will to mine and help me find husbands.
I forgot to read the first half of the sentence.
I mean, that is a partnership. By the way, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, partnership is not one way, right? Like you just support, like, it's okay that there's a little tit for tat. Like that's a beautiful idea, actually, that God and we need each other, right? Like there's a mutuality of it that is, I guess we think of tit for tat as like, I don't know, cheap and like, but I think actually like tit for tat is the basis of many great relationships, every covenantal relationship. You need something from us, we need something from you. Let's make this work together. So I like that reading. I think the partnership take on it is very beautiful.
Maybe also appealing to the parental, that they're, so the shofar blower is saying, as a parent, this is what I want. And you as my parent should want this for me. So sort of appealing to that.
Oh, I love that. That's a beautiful addition to that reading, which I had not, which was totally lost on me. I love that. So, you know, I bent my will to yours, Heavenly Father, right? So that you could have your children fulfill, you know, your desires for your children. How about you help me out? I'm also a father. Help me fulfill my desires for my children. That's very beautiful, beautiful reading. Thank you for that. I'll add one more, which I think is important, and actually is part of the reason why I went with Hasidic tales for our introduction into this sort of like Elul awakening, as opposed to very technical text like halacha, you know, Jewish law or something like that, or even tefillah. You know, this is saying, you know, all these guys, what do they come? They come and they're giving these, you know, treatises of mystical thought and the sfirot according to the Ari and where the soul goes and what it does and the chambers of heaven and yada, yada, yada. And Levi Yitzchak's like, yeah, you're very, very smart, but you don't seem to be getting this, right? And then this guy comes along and he's like, I just want to talk about my life, which is, you know, I got needs, I got things I want. And it's, you know, and I think there's like a message coming saying like, you know, you want to be erudite and you want to be a Talmid Chacham and you want to like show off your knowledge. That's great, but that's just hiding. On the high holidays, we got to be raw. We got to bring it and tell it like it is. I don't want to know how much Talmud you know, says God. I just want to know who you are and share yourself with me in an honest, simple way, not hiding behind 100 different texts and traditions and these kinds of things. And I think that's counterintuitive. You know, I can't tell you, if you look on the web right now, you will find 1,000 shiurim from different Ravs about the Mishnah of Rosh Hashanah, about the you know, Hilchot Tshuva, the laws of tshuva, all these kinds of things, which, by the way, is all good. I'm not criticizing them for that, but I think this is saying, like, don't get so caught up in the technicalities that you forget that this is about like meeting God and God meeting you where you're at and having a real honest conversation. Like, I need, you know, life is tough. I need some closeness here. I'm trying to do my part for you in the world. Can you, how about a little support? You know, that's very beautiful, very simple, very honest kind of place. And I think that is the prescription here emotionally. This isn't the time to show off how much you know or any of those kinds of things. Making sense? All really good, beautiful reason. I love that that's connected to family. You know, what could be more basic need than sort of taking care of your children, perpetuating your line, the generations going forward, yada, yada. Okay, any other thoughts about Levi Yitzchak before we go on? Okay, let's go on then. So this is another one of these texts. This is from Alan Liu's absolutely incredible book, that this is real and you are completely unprepared. May or may not. So we're just going to do the first part of this. I think he brings a story about the Baal Shem Tov looking for a shofar blower. So if it's okay, I'm going to read this one. It's kind of long, and I'm going to read this one. Okay, so bear with me. Every year before the days of awe, the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic Judaism, held a competition to see who would blow the shofar for him on Rosh Hashanah. Now, if you wanted to blow the shofar for the Baal Shem Tov, not only did you have to blow the shofar like a virtuoso, but you had to learn an elaborate system of kavanot, secret prayers that were said just before you blew the shofar to direct the shofar blasts and to see that they had the proper effects in the supernal realms. All the prospective shofar blowers practiced these kavanot for months. They were difficult and complex. There was one fellow who wanted to blow the shofar for the Baal Shem Tov so badly that he'd been practicing these kavanot for years. But when his time came to audition before the Baal Shem, he realized that nothing he had done had prepared him adequately for the experience of standing before this great and holy man. And he appled. He choked. His mind froze completely. He couldn't remember one of those kavanot he had practiced for all those years. He couldn't even remember what he was supposed to be doing at all. He just stood before the Baal Shem in utter silence. And then when he realized how egregiously, how utterly he had failed this great test, his heart broke in two and he began to weep. Sobbing loudly, his shoulders heaved and his whole body racking as he wept. "All right, you're hired," said the Baal Shem Tov. "But I don't understand," the man said. "I failed the test completely. I couldn't even remember one kavanah." So the Baal Shem explained with the following parable. In the palace of the king, there are many secret chambers, and there are secret keys for each chamber, but one key unlocks them all. And that key is an axe. The king is the Lord of the universe, the Baal Shem explained. The palace is the house of God. The secret chambers are the sphirot, the ascending spiritual realms that bring us closer and closer to God when we perform commandments, such as blowing the shofar with the proper intention. And the secret keys are the kavanot. And the axe, the key that opens every chamber and brings us directly into the chamber of the king, wherever he may be. The axe is the broken heart. For as it says in Psalms, God is close to the brokenhearted. All right. So what do we think this midrash is trying to tell us? This story of the Baal Shem Tov and his shofar blower about our attitude, what we're supposed to come into, the emotional valence entering the high holidays.
Humility.
Humility, say more, how so?
The humbleness of being so in awe that one makes mistakes and forgets, and to me, the value of humility is more important than someone who does everything with perfection. And
yeah, I love that. And there's that recognition standing before, this guy standing before the greatness of the Baal Shem Tov has this recognition of like, what the heck am I doing here? Right? Like I'm nothing. Like I don't belong here.
Yeah. I think of children and when they make mistakes and how they feel and how we as adults or peers, support their mistakes and how they feel and how we feel as adults and how we can feel humbled.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. We have a book here for one of our boys had a real perfectionist streak, which he clearly got from his mother and not from me. And there's a children's book called Beautiful Oops. And this book, Julie, it's a beautiful book. It's like things are happening and then they're transforming them into beautiful things. And that wouldn't be if the mistake hadn't been made. And great book. And I think so I love that as a look at this too. Oh, Tammy's on here. I forgot. Right. So Tammy, of course, not only is the perfectionist in our family, but found that book because she's awesome. Great. Other thoughts on this midrash? Richie, you had unmuted there.
Well, I was tying it to the midrash we just had before, which is sincerity. Humility is one, but sincerity. It's really sincere. His emotion was true to his heart, just as the midrash before. He was sincere. He wasn't trying to put on airs. He wasn't trying to do the studious component. He was trying to tell what was in his heart. Same, it may be broken or transactional. It was a sincere emotion. And I think when we go to, I know for myself, when we're going through the Rosh Hashanah services and such, I try to be sincere and pick out the sins that I might have done and try to be sincere in identifying it and trying not to do them again. I think sincerity is what I was hearing.
I love that. Yeah, just a kind of a pure honesty, whether he liked it or not. He couldn't help it. It was just like a very pure and honest moment. All his walls were kind of down, and he was just it was out there. I love that.
I just to add to that, I think the word that came to mind for me was raw. Right? There's a bearing of the soul, a raw expression of emotion, which I don't know that I normally would say I get to most of the time, because being raw is difficult even in the best of circumstances. And, to that point about it being a communal nature, right? Exposing your sins in a communal setting, it makes me think of that joke that like, I am nothing. No, I am, the rabbi says it, and then the cantor says it. I am nothing.
You're ruining the joke. You're ruining the joke.
All right, you tell the joke.
Everyone here knows the joke.
All right, you tell the joke.
The joke is that it's high holidays and the rabbi gets overwhelmed, with like emotion. He drops down on the beam and he bows before the ark and says, "Oh Lord, I am nothing before you." And then the cantor, looks at the rabbi and he's overwhelmed with emotion. He drops down. He says, "Oh Lord, I am nothing before you." And the president looks at the rabbi and the cantor. He's overwhelmed with emotion. He drops down on the president of the shul says, "Oh Lord, I am nothing before you." And the rabbi turns to the cantor and says, "Look who thinks he's nothing." Classic rabbi high holiday humor. Anyway,
so that like it can be a little bit hard to be raw in front of others, because like you're weeping really at shul, people might be looking at you.
Yeah. And I think, yes, I think you're onto something there. And I think this definitely fits with a midrash about the Baal Shem Tov, who had no tolerance for any of these kinds of things, right? People going to the shul for Rosh Hashanah, right? We're actually putting on airs, right? We buy our special outfit and we are going to see, like we said, it's a family reunion. We're going to see people we only see once a year. We want to look nice. We want to put up a good front, put up a good face. We do not, for the most part, myself included, right? I mean, I'm a professional. I can't go in there and just, fall apart. I have to. So we actually walk in not like this shofar blower. And of course we can't walk in like the shofar blower. That's okay. But this is saying like, well, maybe we need to like drop some of the artifice of looking the part of the high holidays and looking the part of, and just be honest, like, especially this year, right? Going back to sort of what Louise was saying very early on about this year's different, like, none of us deserve to be looking like we have all of our what together in the shul this year. Like none of us have it together. It's hard. We're all struggling. We're all grasping. And we will gain more from coming into the shul and being honest with each other that we're all having our struggles. They may be different struggles, but that these are hard times, than we will trying to look like we all have it together, right? We're kind of missing the point. And I think this is definitely making that point that come with more honesty than we usually do. I think there's a little bit of polemic in here. Other thoughts?
To me, it said openness, that he became open. He was there, he practiced it, but when he was in front of him, he just opened up and felt something spiritual, I guess I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that, so I'm going to put the text back up on the screen. I just want to be able to, all of us to see each other. Oops, wrong thing. Stop share. Sorry. Let me try that one more time. Share the right thing. Here we go. So, so I think you're all right. I think that openness is true. And right, this whole story, I think, is a metaphor, right? It's not that the Baal Shem Tov, this guy walks in before the Baal Shem Tov, is completely overwhelmed by how small he is and how great the Baal Shem is. And therefore just his heart breaks and he just approaches the Baal Shem Tov with total openness. What is the Midrash trying to tell us about the high holidays? Not that we should walk before the rabbi and realize that we are in way over our heads, but that we're supposed to walk before God and feel that way, right? The emotion of the shofar blower, he walks in before this great rabbi and he's like, what the heck am I doing here? Like, I think I can serve this rabbi. I think I can blow shofar in his Beit Midrash. I'm supposed to like I am worth anything next to this guy, and I'm going to be a shofar blower. And it is his complete emptiness, his complete humility, maybe beyond humility, to an emotion that's maybe not as healthy, to worthlessness. I can't do this. I'm not adequate to do this. But ultimately, I think the Midrash is telling us that is how we are supposed to feel when we approach God on the high holidays. That we realize how unworthy we are of God's attention, and yet how desperately we want it, just like this guy before the Baal Shem Tov. And it's only when we reach that place of sort of honesty with ourselves that our own broken hearts of how we have not lived up to our potential, how we're not, we're supposed to be in partnership with God, right? We talked about this partnership earlier, and we're not really worthy of our part of the partnership. And as Alan Liu would say it, this is real, and we're completely unprepared, that our hearts should break. But actually, that's not a bad thing. That recognizing that is actually the axe that will break through the doors and give us access to our best selves and the path that God has laid for us, and ultimately to be able to be in that partnership. But every year we need a reset. We need to actually recognize, with humility in our relationship with God. So I think the whole thing is like a right? So the whole thing of the guy coming before the Baal Shem Tov is a metaphor for how we're supposed to feel coming before God. And as we look back at our year, because we're only human, we can't help but be brokenhearted that we just didn't do as good as we should have, as we could have. And that ultimately it's that recognition that will burst down the doors and put us in that place to be with God. And I love that metaphor. I love that he says, there's one key that opens every door, and you expect him to be like the master key, the skeleton key. It's like an axe, like you got to beat through those doors. You got to chop those doors down. I love that. I just think there's like, you got to burst through so God can't ignore you. And the way to do that is with this complete honesty. Okay. Other thought. This is beautiful. I love this one. I'm sure you could tell from the way I describe it. Other thoughts on it. This is hard to do. It's hard to reach this point. I don't know that any of us ever really totally reach this point, but it's a beautiful thing to strive for. Okay, moving on a little. It's a nice, Alan Liu brings a nice piece about the shofar, but for the sake of time, I'm going to skip it because there's two more texts and I want to get to the last two texts. I think they're more important. You go back and read this piece about how the shofar is blown 100 times. It basically opens a connection between us and God. Very beautiful, but we'll skip it for now. The next Hasidic master we are going to read is Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. He is known as the Alter Rebbe of Chabad, the founding Rebbe of Chabad. Someone to read this story for us.
I'll read it.
Okay.
The king's usual place is in the capital city in the royal palace. Anyone wishing to approach the king must go through the appropriate channels in the palace bureaucracy and gain the approval of the succession of secretaries and ministers. He must journey to the capital and pass through the many gates, corridors, and antechambers that lead to the throne room. His presentation must be meticulously prepared, and he must adhere to an exacting code of dress, speech, and mannerism upon entering the royal presence. However, there are times when the king comes out to the fields outside the city. At such times, anyone can approach him. The king receives them all with a smiling face and a radiant countenance. The peasant behind his plow has access to the king in a manner unavailable to the highest ranking minister of the royal court when the king is in the palace. The month of Elul, says Rabbi Schneur Zalman, is when the king is in the field.
So this is a very different tone from what we've
Very
been
different.
reading.
It's,
So what do we think? What's the emotional valence? How does it make you feel?
well, it's different from the others. It's not talking about awe that much. It's talking about a time of more closeness to God, not for unusually great awe, but the opposite sort of more closeness.
Yeah, intimacy, I would even say.
Intimacy,
That-
right? Yeah.
There's a time where intimacy is possible when it's just not the rest of the year. By the way, one of the things I like about this, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, but this is a beautiful description for Elul. I think it's in line with when the Midrash that explains Elul as a acronym for the pasuk Ani Lidodi Vidodi Li, right? So Aleph Ani, Lamed Lidodi. So Elul Ani Lidodi Vidodi Li. I am my beloved and my beloved is mine, that there's this opportunity during Elul to be close to God in a way that is different from the rest of the year. I think this take on it really leans into that concept. Other thoughts? I saw a lot of smiles and nodding heads at this one.
Well, I think it also because the king's not there in the field and God's not there in the field on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. He's there on Elul. So it's almost like you need to make your connections. You need to prepare and make connections beforehand. Because once you get to the palace, the mood's going to shift, and you're going to be in this more rigid, just scripted sort of experience. But you have access, but it's during Elul.
Yeah, I love that. So this is actually like, go make your relationship, go get square with the king beforehand, because you do have to go through all the pomp and ceremony. That is part of the deal. But you have this opportunity before then to sort of, have your private audience in kind of a more relaxed setting.
And maybe it makes the pomp and ceremony attachable, like something you can even feel because you already have a relationship. You have to do that work beforehand, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's my king that I had a conversation with in the field. Here I'm going to be appropriate because this is the setting for this sort of behavior, but we already have a relationship because we already had a conversation in the field.
Yeah, there's almost like a wink and a nudge to it, like if that's the case, by the time you get to the real pomp, which, I don't know if you've ever had those kind of experience. I'm trying to think of a parallel for me, they're all in shul, right? Like I remember being a kid and I didn't understand what was going on, and it was all very overwhelming. When I started to have a more friendly relationship with the rabbis, because we were becoming more like peers than we were with, suddenly sitting in shul had a different feel to it. They would be giving their sermon. I was listening to it differently. They would give me they'd give me a knowing look about something going on. And so the pomp and the ceremony was still there, but there was even an intimacy underneath it because of the prior relationship. So I love that idea of sort of like Elul is the time to forge that intimate relationship. And then the high holidays actually are more meaningful in a way because they have this under sort of, that's a beautiful idea. Louise, you look like you were gonna.
Yeah, I think it's also putting everyone on equal ground. So it's not like you need to be the more learned person or, the more pious person, that everyone's on equal ground and everyone has the same access to reach the same point.
Yeah, I love that. Right, you don't need to know all the diplomatic lingo and all the moves you're supposed to make. Like, you have the opportunity, just show up and
Yeah.
And have lunch, or whatever it is. That is sweet. Other thoughts about the Alter Rebbe's story here? Really beautiful. I think a really nice, and again, a different, I think, a very different emotion from what we've been reading, maybe something different than we think about, this kind of intimacy, this opportunity for intimacy as sort of a prep for the high holiday seasons. So I wanted to share that. Okay, we have one more. Okay, so the last one, we're going to go back to the Baal Shem Tov. I really like this one also. Someone want to read to us from the Keter Shem Tov, stories about the Baal Shem Tov?
I'll read it.
Okay, Fern.
A king had a son, an only child. The king wanted his son to learn and to experience various cultures. So he sent him to a far-off country, supplied with a generous quantity of silver and gold. Far away from home, the son squandered all the money until he was left completely destitute. In his distress, he resolved to return to his father's house, and after much difficulty, he managed to arrive at the gate of the courtyard to his father's palace. He had forgotten the language of his native country, and he was unable to identify himself to the guards. In utter despair, he began to cry out in a loud voice, and the king, who recognized the voice of his son, went out to him and brought him into the house, kissing him and hugging him. The meaning of the parable, the king is God, the prince is the Jewish people, who are called children of God. The king sends a soul down to this world in order to fulfill the Torah and mitzvot. However, the soul becomes very distant and forgets everything to which it was accustomed to above. And in its exile, it forgets even its own language. So it utters a simple cry to God in heaven. This is the blowing of the shofar, a cry from deep within, expressing regret for the past and determination for the future. This cry elicits God's mercies, and God demonstrates God's abiding affection for God's children, and God forgives them.
All right, what do we think of this story of the Baal Shem about the shofar?
Well, it certainly symbolizes a rekindling of a relationship.
It's a little tricky because the shofar is the community's communication, not an individual. We don't all get shofarim and start blowing them. It's there is a shofar blowing for everybody. So is that the point that it's making, that the communal communication with God is what counts here? Because it specifically talks about the shofar blowing, not to fill in or fill him or anything.
Yeah, it's an interesting side point. I think it's an interesting note that we don't all blow the shofar. Our mitzvah is to hear the shofar, not to blow the shofar. Yeah. But somehow communally, the shofar gets God's attention, wherever we're at,
But the shofar is being blown on behalf of all of us.
Yeah.
I like the symbolism. It was simpler. It was pretty much straight to the point. I liked it from that point of view. Taking it at the surface level, it was easy to identify with it. And I think to Lee's point, though, It talks about the son is the children of God, not a child of God. And so blowing the shofar is a cry out for all the children of God. So it'd be more in line with what we used to. I
Last
still
year,
think we should just buy 2 goats and get it done with.
Save us
Yeah,
all
and a red
a lot of time. Yeah. Tammy, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I actually had an opposite feeling. I connected to this one the least. I think maybe because I don't think of myself as being completely lost and not sure even how to find the words. And so this one just, nice story, but it didn't do anything for me personally, spiritually.
I connected with it more. I mean, and there are a lot of times you feel like you're disconnected. You feel that you've lost some sort of connection, that you feel, you know, whether it's with God or with your family or with everything, you sort of lost the language to communicate properly. So I thought it was very sweet.
Yeah.
I liked it. Last year, well, it talked to me. Last year, you had the shofar blowing right before Rosh Hashanah outside the synagogue, if you remember.
I do.
And Tammy said, "Oh, come on, they're going to have that." And I said, "Okay, I'll go." And when I heard it, I just got overwhelmed. I got verklempt. I was almost brought to tears, and I did not expect that. So I don't know what I'm trying to say with that, but the shofar and hearing it is like, okay, now the start. Now open yourself. There's the openness again. Open yourself up.
Yeah.
I had the same experience last year when I went to the parking lot to hear the shofar.
Did
I
you?
was determined to do it, and I figured, I don't know. And then when I did, it was so, I don't even know how to describe it. You described it perfect. You described how I felt.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. A couple of things that I really do like about this one. I do like the fact that wherever you may be, it's hard to come into the holidays feeling like you know enough. Now, you can know a lot. You could know, it's hard. Even as the rabbi, it's hard to come in. There's so much liturgy. There's so much symbolism. It's tricky. It's difficult. It's, and so one thing that's nice about this, it's like, you don't have to know anything. Like if you can just cry out with sincerity, God will hear you and God will take you in. If you know things like getting in touch with the liturgy, there's obviously important symbolism and whatnot, but ultimately like the shofar, it's simple carnality, right? The fact that it's just a horn, it's not even a refined instrument. It's just a horn, literally a horn. And there's something very, I don't know. The other thing that it does is, some of you may know the Talmudic explanation of the notes of the shofar. Tekiah is just a long musical blast, but shavarim and teruah are both supposed to sound like cries, like crying. So the shavarim, which is 3 medium-sized blasts, is supposed to sound like wah, wah, wah. And the teruah, which is at least 9 staccato taps, is supposed to sound like, and that we do both because the rabbis can't decide which is the kind of crying we're supposed to sound like, right? So we do both. That's why we have those 2 notes. So this midrash is actually picking up on that sound. That when we hear the tekiah, it's supposed to be like we do on this month in the mornings. Wake up. We talk about like the alarm clock, but those middle ones are actually a much deeper emotional valence. They're crying. And it seems to me the Baal Shem is saying here, you may have nothing left. It doesn't matter how far you've fallen. It doesn't matter how far you've gotten off the track that God had set for you. It doesn't matter how lost you feel, how disconnected you are from Judaism, how disconnected you are from mitzvot, how disconnected you are from yourself, your family, your history, your heritage. If you cry out honestly and earnestly, God's going to come take you in with hugs and kisses. it's a nice feeling for, for entering into, I think, it's like you said, Louise, part of the reason why you came tonight, I mean, you come to my classes often, but specifically was like you were feeling a little off. I don't know how to approach the high holidays. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. This says like, it doesn't matter, it matters, but come with whatever you got, and God's gonna meet you wherever you're at. Which I think is a beautiful message. The Baal Shem and his followers in Eastern Europe had their tsuris, and also I'm sure sometimes felt very far away from what they thought their destiny should have been. And we too, in a hard year, approaching these high holidays, disappointed to say the least, right? That we were kind of coming out as people were getting vaccinated. And I think we're all a little shocked at where we're at with COVID, and not to mention all the other things going on in the world. Like, it's a little disturbing times. That this reminds us, like, that's fine. Just come and cry about it. And you're not going to cry alone. God's going to meet you there. We're going to be together. We all are feeling a lot of these emotions. So again, just kind of a beautiful, I think, communal and accepting message as we kind of make our way through Elul and start turning our attention to more spiritual matters. Other thoughts, other ideas? All right. I hope you liked Story Hour. I like Story Hour. So next week we'll pick up again. We'll go a little more technical. We'll look at some of the prayers, same ideas. We're going to be exploring the same concepts and ideas, but maybe a little bit more through the prayers and the rituals and the more ancient texts. And then, like I said, we'll do next week at 7:30, and then we'll take a break until October. We'll start our regular learning again. Okay, last thoughts. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you. Have a good
Good
night,
night,
everyone.
everyone.
Good night.
Ta-da. That's right.